attention down to your sit bones. We're going to march the sit bones. Let's march them back, back, and back, and back, and march them front, and front, and front, and front. Again, march back, and back, and back, and back, and marching front, and front, and front, and front. Sit tall in your seat. You should be towards the front of your seat. We're going to lift up the toes just off the floor, and then lift just the heels off the floor. So we lift the toes off the floor, lift the heels off the floor, lift the toes off the floor, lift the heels off the floor. And we're going to march 4 marches back with our sit bone, 4 marches forward. Here we go. March back, and 2, 3, and 4, march forward, and 2, and 3, and 4. We have toes and heels, toes and heels, toes and heels, toes and heels. Again, march back, and 2, and 3, and 4, and march forward, and 2, and 3, and 4. Lift the toes and the heels, lift the toes and then the heels, lift the toes and then the heels, lift the toes and then the heels, and march back, and 2, and 3, and 4, and march forward, and 2, and 3, and 4. Lift the toes, then the heels, lift the toes, then the heels, lift the toes, then the heels. One more, lift the toes, then the heels, heels down. Be still a moment and just breathe. Take your awareness inward and just notice, has anything changed in the torso? Anything at all? But we're going to go back with our hands, and this time we're going to use a soft fist. We're going to hold our hands out to the front, and our fists are going to nod like our head. And as you go, see how far you can take or roll your fist downwards. You get a little stretch here at the wrist, and then how far you can bring them back so you get a little stretch at the front of the wrist. So we're going to nod the wrists. They go yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Then circle them in, circle in, circle in, circle in. Nod the wrists. Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Circle out, circle out, circle out, circle out. Same movement, but hands go up towards the ceiling. So we nod the wrists. Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Circle in, circle in, circle in, circle in. Nod the wrists. Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Circle out, circle out, circle out, circle out. Same movement, hands are to the side, but take a look here. When my hands are to the side, they're a little bit in front of me, not directly out to the side, and wrists nod yes, and yes, and yes, and yes, and circle in, circle in, circle in, circle in. Nod the wrist, yes, and yes, and yes, and yes, and circle out, circle out, circle out, circle out. Press out with the hand and then just shake them out to the side. Shake them up to the ceiling and shake them out in front of you. Shake them down to the ground. This is going to be a push hand. So we're going to push our hand forward. Our hand is flat out. We're going to use our other hand for resistance. So we're going to press forward like so. Then we come back and turn the hand over. So then you push forward like so. So I'm pushing my fingers into my hand and I'm offering a little resistance. So here we go. Again, we press forward and pull back and push forward and pull back. Other side. Press forward and pull back and push forward and pull back. Again, forward and pull back and back of the hand, pull back. Switch hands, forward and pull back, and the back of the hand and pull back. One more time each side. Push forward and pull back, and the top of the hand and pull back. Other arm, push forward and pull back, and top of the hand and pull back, and we'll wind the wrists again and release the arms down. Let's go back to our accordion breath. So we did our accordions here at the side of the body, but what would it mean to have an accordion here at the front of the body? You take a breath in, and we're going to go ahead and use our arms here. So I'm going to take a breath in like this and opening up the ribs at the front of the body, but then take the arms around and close the ribs at the front of the body. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. One more. Inhale and exhale. Inhale, come up to a tall seat and take a breath in. Just noticing the feeling of movement in the lungs as you breathe. Inhale and exhale. We're going to go back to our sit bone marches, so find your sit bones there on your seat. And we're going to march for 4 back and 4 forward. We march back and 2 and 3 and 4. Then we march forward and 2 and 3 and 4. We're going to lift a knee and lift the knee, lift the knee and lift a knee. March again. Back and 2 and 3 and 4 and march forward and 2 and 3 and 4. Then lift the knee and lift the knee, lift the knee and lift the knee. March again and march and 2 and 3 and 4. Forward 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Lift the knee, put the foot down, lift the knee, put the foot down, lift the knee, put the foot down, lift the knee, put the foot down and stop.